If you've ever walked away from a family conversation feeling like, how did I end up being the problem again? Chances are you've been scapegoated. Merriam-Webster's defines a scapegoat as, and I quote, one that bears the blame for others or one that is the object of irrational hostility. I was the scapegoat in my family, and man, those definitions are accurate. Maybe you are or were the scapegoat of your family. In psychology and in family systems, the scapegoat is the family member unconsciously chosen to carry the weight of dysfunction, to be the lightning rod, so the real issues never have to be addressed. And typically, mom, dad, siblings struggle with shame and they're after counterfeit peace. And they want to protect their self image at all costs, to the point of they will mentally brainwash you to believing that you're the problem so that they don't have to face their own sins and shortcomings. And if we're honest, it's very subtle, super subtle. Some families, it's more subtle than others. It's very painful. It can shape your entire identity if you don't learn how to break free. And I have friends and I have clients who are the scapegoat or were the scapegoat. And it's amazing how much it can ruin your identity, your self-trust. I mean, it really does destroy. And I think we need to talk about it. I want to look at the anatomy of scapegoating. Scapegoating happens when truth gets too close to home. That's right, you heard it. If you are the scapegoat, usually you are the most honest, objective, and truth teller. You care about the truth. You're after the truth. You're empathetic, you're emotionally mature usually, to the point of where you realize that you might have done something wrong too. Like you're able to examine things in a way and reflect and go, okay, what was my part in this too? So instead of facing their own sin, shames, or wounds, people project it outward. They accuse, they deflect, they blame shift and unload on whoever poses the greatest threat to their very, 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 very fragile self image. And here's what makes it so incredibly complex. Scapegoating usually rides on the back of three psychological defense mechanisms: projection, blame shifting, and deflection. I want to go through all three. So projection is when someone attributes to you what is actually inside of them. In my experience as a psychologist or psychology practitioner, whatever you want to call me, um, most people project. When people are talking, they're usually projecting to some degree. Most things are not about whoever they're talking about, right? Like people are obsessed with themselves. The definition, let's look at that. In psychology, projection is an unconscious defense mechanism where a person disowns thoughts, feelings, or motives they cannot accept in themselves and instead see them in someone else. So let's look at an example. Your mother accuses you of being selfish because you set a boundary and won't take her late night call. But in reality, she's the one being selfish, demanding access to you on her team and on her terms with no regard of your needs. Projection is powerful because it creates a false mirror. If you're not grounded, if you're not discerning in what people are saying, and honestly, if you don't know too much about human behavior, it's very easy that you'll look in it and think, oh my, maybe I really am selfish. Like projection can be so disorienting and confusing to deal with if you're not sharp. And I've had to get sharp over the years because of what I do with my one-on-one clients. But remember, when someone is attacking you, usually they're projecting. Not going to say always, but usually. And then there's the blame shifting. Blame shifting, some people are great at this, like amazing. And in my experience, men have been more amazing at this than women, or immature men, I should say. Not to say that only men blame shift. That's not what I'm saying. Just I've experienced a lot more blame shifting with men than women. Blame shifting is when responsibility for a problem is redirected off the true source and placed onto someone else, often the scapegoat. So if you've ever shared something and then all of a sudden it felt like the tables got turned, that's a perfect example of blame shifting. It's a defense strategy where accountability is transferred away from the actual perpetrator or cause onto a more vulnerable or convenient target. Let's look at some examples. A father screams at his children and throws a chair. Later, instead of taking ownership, he says, I wouldn't have gotten so mad if you didn't provoke me. No one can make you do anything unless your life is threatened. Then it's a different conversation. Can't stand when people say, "You made me angry. You made me do this." No, they didn't. There's like 5 other emotions you could have picked instead of anger. Nobody can make you do anything. Notice what happened though. The violence became your responsibility, right? So they're not taking ownership, they're putting it on you. Blame shifting is insidious because it traps you in a false guilt. You start rehearsing what you should have done differently instead of naming the real issue, which is someone else's inability to regulate their emotions. Deflection. Deflection is when the focus of accountability is sidestepped or redirected so the real issue never has to be confronted. Deflection is easier to identify because typically you ask a question and they're not going to respond. They're going to dance around your question. But you have to stay focused on the conversation and almost be like almost like a lawyer, being very aware of everything that's happening, being mindful of what you're asking, and not allowing your emotions to consume you. You've got to be like an eagle of the conversation, observing both parties. The deflection definition, it's a tactic used to divert attention away from the actual problem, usually by creating a distraction, introducing a counter accusation, or minimizing the concern. So, an example is you bring up that your sibling lied about you to a relative. Instead of addressing it, they respond, "Wow, you're always so negative. Why can't you just let things go?" It's like, well, why can't you answer the question? Notice the trick. They've now shifted the focus from their dishonesty to your tone. The real issue, lying, gets buried under a new accusation. So you got to remember, what is the first complaint you're sharing? And are we staying on that agenda or have they shifted agenda? When you are speaking with someone who's emotionally immature or cannot accurately see themselves or has deep shame they haven't dealt with, you have to remember the agenda. You have to remember the points that you are saying because they will very quickly turn the tables or deflect. You've got to be like sharp in these conversations. Now, the psychological cocktail of scapegoating is this. What makes scapegoating so destructive is that it's rarely just one of these tactics. It's usually all three simultaneously. Like there's so much disorientation, chaos, and confusion when you are the scapegoat. And there's so much happening that it's like hard to catch it all. Like I will, some of my clients will use me as the scapegoat. And when I get their emails, there's like 19 things that's at play. And it's very overwhelming. And I've got to like calm down and really track each thread because sometimes these people do a great job of flattening everything into one issue and everything is not just one issue. For example, you'll raise a truth, right? You'll share a concern about the truth and then they project, right? You're the angry one. I'm fine. Or you ask for accountability and they blame shift. Oh, this wouldn't have happened if you weren't so dramatic, if you didn't make me do it. Or you hold the line and then they deflect. We're not talking about me. We're talking about your disrespect. Whoa, you just changed the conversation here. By the end, you might feel dizzy, disoriented, unsure of what just happened. Maybe you're questioning your reality and wondering if maybe you're the problem. If you start to wonder if you're the problem constantly, that's a huge indicator you're the scapegoat. And this is why learning to pay attention to the accuser, their words, their behavior, their patterns, especially instead of collapsing inward, is the game changer. So if you can learn how to take people's words and never let it hit your heart, but always keep it outside of your heart, then it's so much easier to analyze all of the, if you will, crap that's being thrown at you. You have to learn how to be steady in truth. And I think sometimes the more you can understand your emotions and the parts inside of you, it's easier to do this. When you start recognizing projection, blame shifting, and deflection for what they are, you can stop absorbing them as reality and you can say inside yourself, that's projection. They're putting on me what they don't want to face, or that's blame shifting. They're dodging ownership, or that's deflection. They're distracting me from the real issue. And when you can start to label what's happening in a conversation, which it's taken me years to do this, but if you can start practicing labeling what's happening in a conversation at a very granular and nuanced level, it's easier to detach from what's happening. Like one of my biggest clues is when somebody overreacts to what I'm saying, when I don't have a mean tone, when I'm operating the fruit of the spirit, when I'm truly trying to get to an answer. And if they start accusing or being overly defensive or calling me names, name calling is a huge indicator, or honestly just acting like a child in an adult body, then I know I've struck a nerve And typically what's happening is, or what they're saying is what's happening inside of them. And so sometimes I will take a second and say, I notice you're having some really strong reaction. What is the meaning you're making out of what I've just said? Because people really want to attack when they feel violated, right? Like this is animalistic survival. Like, why would you need to attack me unless I threatened you? And I can only have threatened you if I said something you didn't want to hear in the type of context that I'm sharing right now. Remember this anchor, though, the truth of who you are in Christ. So 2 Corinthians 10:5 says, we demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take every thought captive to make it obedient to Christ. When you're not sure of what the truth is, the best thing to do is go to God. Ask God for sober eyes to see things clearly, for what's the truth, what's your part, where maybe did you step out of line, like own what you need to own and let go of what you need to let go. And then ask the Holy Spirit to share where you keep falling into these lies, where you keep getting like vacuumed into their issues. Like one thing that I learned just because I was the scapegoat for so long is that I will minimize my pain for someone else's pain. Like if my fiance and I are fighting, which, we don't fight that often, but I use these examples so much, you might think that we fight all the time. It could be my mom. It could be, some transactional relationship. I find myself doing it in those too. If they have pain, I will minimize my pain to help them. And so I've learned that is a cue of when I'm no longer standing my ground. So some of this, you're going to have to come into prayer and you're going to have to ask God, like, what are your signs and indicators that you're allowing yourself to be the scapegoat? I've learned that I don't care if you like the truth or if you don't like the truth. I'm not accountable to you. I'm accountable to God. And I'm not going to look at you in the eyes and lie to you. I'm going to tell you the truth. And if you don't like, that's your issue, not my issue. And I've learned that when my body starts being hypervigilant, typically someone is being defensive or accusing me of things that really have to do with them and not me. And so you've got to figure out your own cues so that you can start to detach from playing that role. Because at some point you have to say, I don't want to play this role anymore, and I'm not going to play this role. And sometimes that might mean leaving your family dynamics behind so that you can really stay in healthier relationships. One thing I want to really perseverate on is scapegoating thrives in confusion, chaos, disorientation is going to be there. And I think it's James, I don't remember, but I'm pretty sure James makes it very clear that confusion is not, that's not of God, that is of the devil. But when you learn to discern projection, blame shifting, and deflection in real time, you stop taking the bait. Remember, peace is internal, not external. And a lot of times, I mean, we see this in the Garden of Eden. People are trying to get you to take the bait. Don't take the bait. Don't. At some point, you might have to say, I think we have two different perceptions. So either we can talk this out calmly and with maturity, or we're going to have to agree to disagree. Like you have to learn how to set boundaries and hold firm the line so that people don't like bring you into their level of just insanity and delusion, because people who are going to make you the scapegoat don't want to look at their sins. They don't want to look at where they're falling short because their shame is too much for them. They don't have the coping mechanisms. They don't have the skills to navigate this. But the key is you don't take the bait. You're not going to collapse into shame. You're going to be curious and you're going to go, okay, they're overly reacting after what I said. I wonder what's happening inside of them. Or interesting, they didn't answer the question. And so you've got to spend some time slowing things down and being in your prefrontal cortex. And if you have trauma in your past, this can be hard because your body, your brain is going to see cues for you to be hypervigilant before your mind will, before your soul, your spirit will. And so you've got to pace yourself and really leverage reflection. Like one of the best things I can tell you is after you've been in a situation where there was blame shifting, projection, deflection, gaslighting, or whatever, you need to go, okay, time out. What do I need to edit out? Like where did I like take the bait or minimize myself or dismiss myself to meet them? And what should I have done instead? And ask for the Holy Spirit's help by all means. Because you can walk away saying, I am not who they say I am. And I'm going to be honest, trying to get people to believe who you are is a waste of time if that person doesn't care to learn. Let people believe what they want to believe because they're going to anyways. Let God deal with them. Remember, you are who God says you are, not who people say you are, and you are accountable to God. So when you hold the truth with emotional maturity and spirit led discernment, scapegoating loses its grip. But you have to practice. You have to grow discernment. You have to grow your awareness. You have to start to figure out what are the roles that you are playing in the scapegoat mentality that is hindering you. For instance, just in closing really quickly, when I told my mom about the incest that was happening in my home, it was just met with like silence. We're not going to tell anybody about this. I'm going to pretend like this isn't even real. I'm not going to hear you. I'm not going to see you. I'm not going to recognize your pain because that means I would have to look at myself. And so I just say that point because you need to start to figure out where people are dismissing you and not taking you seriously. And it's an indicator of them, not you. And one of the things that helped me the most in learning how to grow in communication and learn when I'm being at the end of a scapegoating incident is understanding emotions, understanding them in myself, understanding them in others, especially the patterns of those that I'm always involved with, like I'm always hanging around with. And I do have this awesome course. It's one of my best-selling courses. It's Navigating Emotions the Jesus Way. It goes through all the main emotions, how to process them, how to navigate them. It's like 30 some lessons. People are loving this course. And if you feel led, I really encourage you to check it out. I will put the link below. I feel like today's teaching was a little messy. I hope you got some takeaways. I've recorded this like 55,000 times and I didn't really like any of the ones. So this is going to stick. I really wanted to talk about the reality of scapegoating with blame shifting and projection and deflection. And I really hope it helps you choose to break free from that role because you're starting to see the signs. So if they're getting emotionally immature, calling you names, being defensive, projecting, blame shifting, deflecting, those are huge indicators they are trying to make you the scapegoat. And you do not have to agree. You can say, no, I'm going to stand on the truth. And if you don't like it, well, that's your issue, not mine. I'm praying for you. I hope this was impactful. Let me know in the comments if you're on YouTube. If you're on my podcast, please leave a review. It does help the show grow. In the meantime, praying for you. God bless.